everyone to our panel discussion this evening on fashion and the metaverse, the future of Web 3.0. Obviously, that's can be quite a scary title with a little bit of everything, new words, and the discussion will also kind of overview, I guess, what NFTs are, cryptocurrencies, metaverse, digital fashion. But to just help us all get onto the same page, I have prepared a little video that I'm going to share with you that just kind of showcases, I guess, where the industry is at and where we kind of setting the scene for our discussion today.
Whilst virtual reality and AR have been around for some time, the fashion industry has really stepped up its focus on the metaverse and digital fashion in the past few years. University for the Creative Arts are now offering a Master's in Digital Fashion, Balenciaga have recently appointed a Chief Metaverse Officer, and we've seen digital versions of products outsell their physical counterparts by considerable amounts. So it seems that the discussion isn't about if fashion is going to enter the metaverse, but how. The concept of Web3 is not fully realised, and experts debate its specifics, but in essence it is a blending of the physical and digital worlds into a seamless, phygital user experience. Web 1 enabled people to transfer information from one place to another. Web 2 enabled people to connect with each other in more dynamic ways. While Web 3 pushes this concept of interactivity even further and uses decentralization, blockchain technologies, and token-based economies to shift power from big tech companies to individual users. It is a world in which users are in control of their own experiences and are able to have incredibly developed identities that live online in the digital world we call the metaverse. A number of luxury brands have jumped at the chance to capitalize on this trend, diving headfirst into the metaverse through online gaming communities and reaching out to a new and often younger audience. Gucci have been at the forefront with a number of digital experiences on platforms Roblox and Zepeto. Balenciaga and Moncler have launched fully realized collections on the gaming platform Fortnite. And Louis Vuitton launched a phone app called Louis the Game in a great example of a fashion brand extending its reach into the metaverse as a method of dynamic digital branding and innovative Gen Z engagement strategy. And of course, numerous other brands have all jumped on the NFT wagon, which has taken the fashion and art worlds by storm. NFTs, or non-fungible tokens, are digital assets that live on blockchain and record the owner's information. They are bought using cryptocurrencies and are unique and cannot be replaced with something else. Whilst anyone can view a digital image of the item online, the NFT is owned by an individual, and these collectors strongly value those digital bragging rights almost more than the item itself. Digital-only designers and digital-only fashion shows are also on the rise. Digital Fashion Week New York took place in February this year, and virtual platform Decentraland hosted a fully interactive Metaverse Fashion Week in March, complete with virtual parties and exclusive events. Digital garments can now be purchased through a variety of platforms, such as DressX and The Fabricant. These items can be worn by a user's avatar or could be superimposed onto photographs for the ultimate Instagram flex. More traditional platforms such as Farfetch are also using these digital rendering technologies to dress models, brand ambassadors, and consumers, all without creating the physical item. The industry is also realizing that the virtual world can actually have profound utility when it comes to garments and the fashion lifecycle. Digital production methodologies may help meet our need for newness whilst reducing the environmental impact that sampling and distribution have each season. Digital samples can also be used for modelling and marketing before the physical iterations are sent into production, further reducing the impact of the entire fashion lifecycle. So, what are the business opportunities that will emerge from this fast-evolving convergence of physical and digital worlds that has come to be known as the metaverse? Is screenwear the new streetwear? Let's find out.
That is just a little bit of a background on what the metaverse is, digital fashion, and kind of a baseline, I guess, for our discussion. So we have some fantastic panelists with us this evening. So I would love it if you could maybe start with you, Eugene, and give us a little bit of background on your background, I guess, your experience and your work moving forward.
Thank you, Sky. I'm Eugene, and I'm the creative director and founder of the fashion brand Intr. I've been doing physical fashion for many years, like 15, 16 years, but I only really dived into the digital world 3 years ago when I started making CG films and start doing digital fashions. So right now I have a collection selling in digital collection selling in dress eggs, and also we've been participated in crypto fashion week. And basically we keep making a lot of digital films with our new collections, and I'm mainly just doing digital clothing at the moment. Before I'm going to dive back into the physical world, but so upcoming projects are all basically digital collections, NFT digital fashion stuff, and CG films. Yeah.
Oh, perfect. Thank you. And next, shall we go to you, Caitlin? Oh, you're on mute, I think.
Sorry, I thought I already hit unmute. Hey, I'm Caitlin Lomax. I have my own AR, VR, and virtual production studio, Intr. I'm also a senior producer at Lode VR. We're working on Aspire 2 at the moment. It comes out soon on the Oculus Quest. Not Oculus, sorry, Meta Quest. Can't believe I just said that. Just finished up at Immutable working on the blockchain mobile game Guild of Guardians. I do so much crazy random stuff. It's always hard when to like introduce stuff. Yeah, so I mainly work in VR games, but I was a model and I used to do shows like Chanel, Prada, Louis Vuitton, Miu Miu, been in a few issues of Vogue, and yeah, so it's pretty cool. My whole worlds are colliding with all this metaverse digital fashion stuff.
I think it's an interesting perspective, I think, that you bring, having had both sides of the coin, so to speak.
Yeah, it's pretty weird.
Well, fantastic. Darren, can I go to you next?
Yeah, thanks. I'm Darren. I run a virtual augmented reality studio, Ignition Immersive, here in South Melbourne, rainy South Melbourne. It's a beautiful day here. Been in VR AR for about 8 years. Before that, I've always been a technologist, so I played with different types of technologies over time, probably for about 15 years. Come from a filmmaking background, writer-director, so I'm kind of a narrative guy, and I got into VR AR simply because I see the power of immersion from an empathy angle. So a lot of the work we do in the studio now has been more pivoted towards commercial stuff. So we do a lot in sort of VR, AR training, brand activations. Some of that's a little bit dry, and hence my heart is leading me to a new creative studio that we're forming and launching, Exanimo, which is focused around location-based entertainment and physical space activation. And so opportunities with mixed reality and pass-through technology is really where we're kind of looking at. I'm kind of interested in that merging of digital and physical in mass consumer, mass public experiences. So slowly working on a few activations at the moment for 2023.
Isn't that scary, 2023? It's like very...
I had to like think about it as I said it. I'm like, is it 2022?
I think you're the first
actually 2023. I don't know.
Yeah. No, but I think this blend of the physical and the digital, this phygital space, when I was doing my research, came up quite a bit. We love terms, but it is definitely this kind of like blending of realities, which is interesting. But yes, so, last but not least, Daniel, could you please give us a little bit of background?
Yeah, everyone, my name's Daniel Avakian. I've been a designer for almost 200 years, about 20 years. Yeah, so, you know, recently, about 4 months ago, we partook in Australian Fashion Week, and we symbiotically achieved having human models and hyper-realistic avatars sort of work together on the runway. We partnered with BTC Markets. Sorry, you got to say something?
No. I was going to say, I think that's wonderful. Sydney's background of the police sirens going.
Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, I'm on Crown Street in Surrey Hills. Yeah, so we integrated the two, and I'm also a founder of a new startup called Real Time Fashion. Our concept is about getting or bringing product to market in real time, so without the lag of trying to do seasonal collections. So if we can simulate a garment within 7 to 10 days after we've actually concepted the garment, and pressing delete rather than having to eat stock for breakfast, has been our goal originally, and then obviously getting involved in the metaverse and NFT. Recently, about 3 weeks ago, we partook in New York Fashion Week. We had a finale piece that we brought a metaverse asset into real life, and we minted that NFT in real time. And I did it from Sydney. So, or the team did it from Sydney, I did it from Sydney. So yeah, that was kind of a highlight of where we're going with technology and fashion, and into 2023, integrating it more and more into our workflows. So. Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you. I think everyone can see that we've got quite a diverse perspective here, which is great, but all a real passion for where I guess this technology can take us in the future. So one of the things I discovered, I guess, doing this research was how I guess fashion and digital fashion has really sprung into the forefront of the consciousness, possibly during the pandemic and since, I think. A lot of these technologies have been around for a while, but fashion really kind of started to stand up and take notice, I would say, kind of coinciding with the pandemic. So I guess one of my first questions is looking at why, or what do you think has undermined this boost in engagement with digital fashion? And I guess maybe coming to you, Caitlin, with your experience with game design and stuff like that, which is probably one of the earlier areas where fashion interacted in this space. Yeah, do you have any insights as to why now? Why are we talking about it today?
I think it would be silly to deny that the NFT boom of the pandemic was it, because yeah, like you said, this digital fashion stuff has actually been around for a while. Half-Life did it years ago, like 20 years ago or something, and skins and cosmetic upgrades in games is like $1 billion industry. People spend so much money on that already. It just kind of makes sense that we do start looking at it. The physical designers are looking at the digital fashion, being like, how can I translate this into what I do? And like Daniel said, it's a much more friendlier version for the environment. If we can just hit delete, there's so many pros to it. Yeah, it's 100% the NFT boom, crypto boom, though. They got everyone's attention.
I feel like NFTs is kind of a term that we'd never heard of and then all of a sudden had heard of. But that's interesting. And Darren, I guess you said you've worked in this space a lot as well. AR, or augmented reality, I guess, is something that was maybe one of the first forays into this space. Can you give us some understanding, I guess, about what that history was, and you were saying it's still relevant, brands are interested now?
Yeah, look, I actually think, just going back and reflecting on the pandemic, a lot of us found is that we were living digital lives and that none of us really had an asserted digital identity. We thought that we did. So we curate our digital identities on different platforms, and we're all sort of pivoting onto Zoom and Teams and all this sort of stuff. And I think there's this underlying psychological layer that says, well, what is my identity when I'm kind of living in that digital space? That just kind of coincided with what was happening with NFTs and everything else under the hood. So it was definitely an accelerator, but I think people just started to think a little bit more about different ways in which we can communicate and have experience when we're stuck remote and when we're restricted from physical experience. And, you know, AR and VR just play heavily into that alternate physical experience, augmentation of physical environment. So the AR stuff really started to take off in a commercial sense during the pandemic as well, ways to be able to visualize products and things in the home. And then, you know, fashion kind of sits off the tail end of that and really started to pick up. VR, on the other hand, has always been kind of in the backwaters, and that's sort of slowly been picking up over the last couple of years. I worked with a couple of fashion designers last year as part of a Creative Vic project, and it was like alarming and also appealing, in that alarming that they had no idea what was going on in this space, and that once they did, they saw like so much potential. And so there was definitely like an education lag that was happening in the market as well, like an awareness lag. It's great to see that there's, you know, digital fashion courses and awareness now.
Yeah.
But then also just the excitement that they had and what they could bring to it. And I think that's the point with tech, is that technologists are not necessarily the best ideas people. Designers, artists, and others are. And when they kind of flood into a tech space, then you see it flourish. So I'd say, yeah, like the tech's there and it's being driven, and it's yeah, certainly gotten better in the last couple of years. The pandemic's made us think about engagement in a lot of different ways, but having some key artists come into that space and actually do something that resonates with us, I think that's been like a huge driver in the last couple of years. It normalizes it.
Yeah, I guess there's a famous quote, and I'm going to absolutely get it wrong, but it's talking about how necessity is the best invention, or something like that, right? Like when we have to do something, we're kind of forced to develop it. And my personal experience, obviously being stuck here in Melbourne, during the pandemic and being locked down, the scope of exploring your identity and your social experiences online definitely became a huge focus that hadn't been before. So
yeah. It's so weird. Like I saw it in just the creativity of the backgrounds. People were starting to use their virtual backgrounds. You'd get on these calls, and the first couple of times it's normal, and then you jump on calls with people you've been speaking to, and all of a sudden the backgrounds are getting more elaborate and the filters are getting more elaborate. Let's just say boredom drives a lot of innovation as well. So yeah, I think there's a big factor behind what we've seen in the last few years.
Okay, definitely. And I guess one of the things that ties into the why now and the concept of where we are now and where we're going in the future is this concept of digital diversity, I guess. Diversity has been at the forefront, I guess, of the industry's conversation over the past few years. But it's quite interesting now that we are entering this virtual space that we can really explore diversity in all its realms. I know at Metaverse Fashion Week, was it Dolce & Gabbana who had actually cat models walking down the runway? So it was even species diversity, which was kind of cool. So I guess my question is, where do you guys see that diversity tangent going in relation to this digital space? Do you kind of see it going, I guess, how do you see it growing? And again, Caitlin, I come back to you with your modeling experience. Do you have a particular view on that?
I have so many views on this. It's a total game changer for a lot of things. I know one of the upcoming questions, we're going to say it now because it ties into what I'm going to say later, is about digital models taking over real models' jobs and all of this stuff. But those digital copies allowed models to work during a pandemic. So it's kind of are we enabling or are we taking away? And I think everything in technology, there's always going to be someone that looks at the bad part of it and not at the opportunities that come with it. And then coming back to the other part of it is when you're in virtual worlds, it doesn't really matter who you are sitting at the desk. I know a lot of disabled people who spend the majority of their time in virtual worlds, and I don't necessarily even mean in VR, but playing games with their friends online, because it doesn't matter who they are or what is limiting them in the real world. When they're in that world with their friends, they're whoever they want to be. And I really love that about this whole industry.
Yeah, it kind of seems to be, again, I'm probably jumping ahead, but the idea is you can explore all facets of your identity, I guess, in this virtual world. How, at the moment, I guess, from my experience, the world online is still relatively fragmented, right? There's different platforms for different users. How do you all see that developing in the future? Do you see the metaverse as being a single cohesive organism, or do you still see it as being separated by platforms where you have your specific avatar for, Decentraland versus Roblox, for example?
I think that's the big answer to this metaverse question, is a persistent digital identity across multiple, metaverse worlds, if you liken it that way. Look at platforms like Ready Player Me and things like that. People are trying to sort of solve this idea of a consistent digital identity that can go in between these different environments. That's the holy grail of this, and I think that's where you see a real assertion of NFT acquired digital goods, where I can actually take it through into different worlds and experiences. I'm at a cinema watching a movie with my friends in the metaverse, or playing a game at Roblox. It's got to be persistent across that. And so, it's still fragmented. I think big players in the market, that's the holy grail that they're after, the ownership of the authoritative digital avatar and identity of the individual, right? And then everything else revolves around that. That's not quite solved yet. Jury's out, but it's slowly sort of coming to fruition.
And
I hope it's never solved.
It's a scary
I don't
idea,
want one person owning the whole metaverse. I think that would be one person ruling the entire world, and that just doesn't make sense. I like that it's fragmented, but people or teams like Ready Player Me and stuff, they're doing such a good job of making it a more seamless experience between those worlds.
I think portability, though, not ownership, right, but portability.
Yeah.
So you want the things you acquire over here to be available potentially over here. Otherwise, what's the utility value? It's like a driver's license that doesn't work when you go into, one bar to the next. It's what's the point of the driver's license? So that idea of identity being kind of centralized and everything else decentralized, in some kind of way is what makes it more fluid. But yeah, I agree with you. Like, it's scary to think that one person controls that.
Yeah, well, I guess that's the whole point of Web3, right? Is that we're having this decentralization of big tech firms. But then when, I guess, Facebook changed their name to Meta, and they're obviously trying to own that space, and, you know, Decentraland and Sandbox, there does seem to be that there's players trying to, I guess, own the space. How do you all, as designers and active influencers in the digital sphere, kind of respond to that?
Well, I think there's a big thing to do with upskilling. I mean, you've got a whole generation of young designers who are going to go into a world where they're learning how to create seasonal collections still 6 months out to the market. So I think there's going to be a big push in upskilling designers in all the fashion institutes first, as a starting point to learn about 3D pattern making, to learn about 3D rendering, so to collectively increase or collectively, you know, let them understand what 3D can do for them, you know, and especially what I think what I've gone through and what potentially Eugene's gone through, and you know, over the last 10, 15 years of trying to compete with the big players. I think 10% of the entire fashion, I don't know if it's 10%, don't quote me on that, but are ruled by the top end of the market. So the rest of the fashion industry is following. So I think this whole opening up a new workflow for young designers to be able to create 3D fashion could potentially be a very, very important next step for the fashion industry. That is, like Caitlin, and I agree with you, Caitlin, if that is sustainable and gives them another option to plug into their, you know, their real fashion, you know. So I think it's a bit of a curveball, but I think that's where I'd start is educating the young designers and the young ultra creative designers. So yeah.
No, I totally agree. And I guess one of the whole themes I think that emerges from the metaverse and digitized fashion is this concept of sustainability, and also, I guess, what can we do to streamline the process? You know, when you actually, and one of the things we teach in our Bachelor of Fashion Business is generally we have a unit called the Fashion Life Cycle, and students follow a garment from initial design to construction through to production and marketing. And there is a huge amount of waste and a huge amount of, you know, carbon, but also just like time and waste that goes between factories and you and this. And I think, Daniel, when we were speaking earlier, the concept of digitizing that supply chain is really fascinating. Are you able to give us some more insight as to, I know you're working on a project that directly ties into that?
Yeah, I mean, look, NFTs, our goal, my business partner's in his last life, he was in over 30 countries. He owned a couple of Australia's biggest brands. And, you know, the number of sample sets he used to have to create, I think he would create circa 300 styles a season into 33 countries, or circa 9,000 sets of samples. With digital technology, we can create one sample. And as Eugene agrees, the designer always has their designer eye for one sample, and we can simulate the rest. And like I kind of alluded to before, rather than having to, I mean, if celebrity X or blogger X wears purple today, the trend is relevant today. And if your seasonal collection is, you know, a wash of emerald green, you've missed the opportunity. But be able to simulate that design within, like I said, 7 to 10 days gives you the opportunity to take that to your market and then aggregate that potentially on a platform we're talking about, or multiple platforms, Meta being the biggest because he's got the most money. Being able to be on across all those platforms with your fashion is amazing. You know, it's an amazing opportunity for designers. Did that answer your question? Sort of.
Yeah. I guess, Eugene, you've also worked in this space. Do you feel that there is a real, like, is the digital sampling and the digital rendering there yet in order to be able to help us reduce this kind of reliance on physical sampling?
I think in terms of like technology and how realistic it is, I think it's there. I think it's really real. You know, you can experience what's it like. Because all the physics, all the fabric physics, all that happens in the digital world. And for me, you know, I've been doing physical fashion for like many years, and always every season I have the same headache. Yeah, we have so many samples, so many, like 200 samples, and then we have to think of so many wastage already, you know, during the process. And then we have to think of how to get rid of those sample, you know, we're doing a lot of sample sales and all that stuff. Right now, we can basically test everything, even not just the production process, but we can actually show our clients, show people, you know, our testing sample, show them how it looks like, and we can filter out the ones that no one wants, and then we just focus on the one that we think are good. And I think it's really efficient. And also, I think in terms of sustainability, it helps a lot. And also, very interesting is I found that a lot of people, in terms of the consumer basis, they usually buy clothing and they only just wear it once for Instagram purpose, or an expensive $10,000 gown, you know, like couture gown, just wear it for one party, one event, and that's it. I think now this digital fashion thing can basically satisfy desire of consumer, of consumption in a sense, but in a more sustainable way, and which is really good.
Yeah,
That's
I
one
agree
thing.
with Eugene.
Oh, sorry, go Daniel.
Yeah, no, Eugene, you've nailed it. I think being able to show your clients, or having young designers learn how to be able to use 3D pattern making software to show and to see changes on a lapel, or changes on a dress, or like you mentioned, you know, a couture dress like that one, you know, to be able to see that prior to sampling, you know, is the holy grail of what we do as designers, you know, because it's the cost associated, like Eugene mentioned, with sampling, and then, you know, trying to take big box retail orders and then deliver those orders and cross your fingers that you got the right color and the right silhouettes for the season and it sells. The technology can alleviate that, you know, as you have just pointed out, Eugene, you know, by being able to test the market without having to sample, or, you know, get yourself into trouble. So,
Yeah.
Oh, you know, I think the scope of this is fantastic. And one of the terms I came across in my research was this concept of digital couture, right? That a couture garment is traditionally extremely expensive and it's built to the specifics of an individual's body. Whereas with the rise of digitization, you can achieve that sort of rendering of an individual much quicker, I guess.
Can I just add as well, just because I don't know who our audience is, but we're kind of talking about two like really different things, both amazing though, but I just want to make it super clear. So when we're talking about fashion in like a rendered simulated thing, we can get like such high quality, beautiful visuals out of the stuff that sorry, Eugene and Daniel are talking about. You can't replicate that stuff in VR yet. So when you ask I'm so sorry about my talk. when, when you ask about do we have the technology there, we 100% do have the technology for rendering beautiful quality things. In real-time rendering and real-time simulations, though, you usually won't get the quality that we're talking about when we talk about like simulating to check what a garment's going to look like when it's ready. And that doesn't like, that shouldn't stop anyone though, because it opens a whole nother door to like these digital first designers who are creating within the limitations of the technology we have. And, you know, you're thinking about how someone embodies that on an avatar as opposed to a real life person. Yeah, I mean, at Splendor, there was someone who embodied a broccoli with orange boobs and became hell famous on Triple J for it. So, you know, you can be whatever you want in the universe.
But I guess there is that kind of dichotomy, I guess, between fashion or digital fashion for digital fashion's sake and in the metaverse, as you were probably designing for Guild of Guardians, and these skins that we see in these games online and the communities online. And then there's the flip side, which is using the digital tech to facilitate garments in the real world. And I guess we're very lucky here. We kind of have 4 panelists here to you kind of both lean to these different areas. One of the questions I had actually that blends this is the question of, Darren, it comes back to what you said, but the question of utility. So when people are buying these digital garments on DressX, whether they're NFTs or not, what is the utility of these, and how do we see someone using them across platform?
For us, we've been having utilities like AR filters. I think this is the really early technology when people start playing with IG filter. That's like, I think that's like 6-7 years ago when people start playing with IG filter, and it's always about digital makeup, digital accessories and stuff, and people start playing with that technology and start building like fashion items. Fashion designers involved designing IG filters. So that's one of the utilities. And also the screenware, I think that is quite popular. That's actually you have the clothing and then you put it on a photograph of a person. It's quite real. It's actually looks very real. And also NFT, fashion NFT, and USD set files where you can play. That's AR. I think that's AR again. Yeah. For us, that's what we do with the utility.
I think the utility is really just driven by this idea of ownership at the moment, really, though, right? Like people are acquiring and owning these things. Yeah, you can use them on AR filters and photo substitution, and there's some sort of semi-practical things here, but it goes back to what Daniel and Eugene were saying about people buying a garment once and using it for a photograph, right? What is the utility of some garments that people buy in the real world? Well, it's for a photo or it's to boast something, So I think you can see digital fashion easily replacing some of that physical fashion. There's a huge sustainability question around that, which nobody argues with. So there is that kind of pipeline, and then there is this avatar world and these sorts of things that my avatar can dress. And the question in my mind is, well, there's probably thousands of designs of things that you could pay next to nothing for on an avatar. Why would you pay $1,000 for it? And again, this is like posting rights and brand rights. It's a really, really cloudy space at the moment around the utility of these things once we kind of get into that like metaverse world. But I think that will kind of evolve when you see an enforced ecosystem around what people can assert their rights to ownership of an object, right? And then if we're in particular metaverse worlds where I know that you've got a particular garment and that you must have had to have paid for that garment in order to have it on your avatar, well, now we're talking about something that mimics the real world. So yeah, the utilities are like AR filters, that's great. Ownership, I own this digital item, it's mine, I have it, look at it, that kind of stuff. That's big right now. I think the real utility thing is, we'll see how that evolves over the next couple of years.
I guess this concept of digital scarcity is something that's so fascinating. And I did see digital garments related a lot to streetwear, Off-White, Supreme, places like this, where it's really a bit of a flex, right? Having these the items themselves, like, a Supreme hoodie is not necessarily the most intricate garment you can buy, but it has a huge amount of social and cultural value. And it seems that that's being shifted across to the NFT space, and as well just the general digital garments as well. For those of you, I know Eugene and Daniel, you both created NFTs. How does that play into the space in terms of when you're creating an NFT? Do you envisage it used in a certain way?
Eugene?
I think the NFT helps, because NFT, it's like a blockchain to help authenticate a digital product. With digital fashion, that works the same way as like digital art at the moment. So people basically buy a fashion NFT, they can have sort of like an ownership of the digital version of the product. My experience is, I think people usually, when people buy NFT or digital fashion, they expect things to be like very crazy and more fantasies. Something that you wouldn't wear in the real world. Or like I said earlier, something like a $10,000 gown that they just wear for once, and then they just buy that, and then there's an NFT, they can have a collectible essence to it. So I think the NFT opens up a lot of opportunities for designers to design things digitally, and I can see that it will work with the physical fashion as well, in a sense. I also found that a lot of times when people like the NFT, the digital version of my clothing, they will ask if I'm going to make that in the real thing, even though some of them are like really crazy, flying, floating, bubbling, transformable boots. But people still ask, can you make it in the real item? Can you make that into real fashion? Things like that. And I also found that people buy like the price I can sell in an NFT can be the same as like in the physical fashion. So, people buy it pretty much the same way as they buy physical fashion. And sometimes people, if they can put it on avatars, that would be like fantastic. They have their own version of themselves in the virtual world, and then they can wear the digital fashion as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you, Gene. I think NFTs alone are quite difficult to sell only, but having some sort of unlockable something where, the customer can purchase the NFT, but it could unlock the real garment. I mean, we're working on that at the moment. And then you could also unlock a further discount on your next sale. So all of a sudden, all the retailers are going to go, oh my God. So it's a whole new economy that we can potentially create through digital fashion. That you couldn't sort of do so before. So having some unlockable content isn't the right word, but having that ability to unlock more features through the digital fashion, as well as ownership of the digital asset itself, to be able to sell that on a marketplace, incentivizes. And we're testing that out right now, actually, at New York Fashion Week. Our finale dress, we brought a metaverse asset, because my whole thing has been trying to work out how to make this look like a human through cognition are going to want to purchase this. So we took a metaverse asset and brought it into real IRL, into the real world, and let it walk down the runway, and let's see what happens. And it's had hundreds and hundreds of thousands of views on New York Fashion Week's Instagram. And you've had tens of thousands of people that have liked it. A lot of people are like, you got the haters, but you've also got a lot of people that have liked it. And then, we've sold quite a few of those dresses as the real garment, just from that metaverse imagery that we brought into the real world. So I think that all of a sudden it's sort of a bit of a light bulb moment to say, hey, this is the next thing, so.
And I think it can also be a different way to market your physical products as well. It can be, digital fashion can be a good digital campaign kind of, marketing tool as well. It doesn't always have to be like making digital clothing and selling digital clothing. But with digital clothing, digital avatars, for example, we made digital films, CG films, music videos just to promote our products. So it becomes more like a marketing tool as well. Alongside, we can sell NFTs, and yeah,
Absolutely.
Yeah, I guess that comes to one of my next themes, I guess, which is this concept of connecting with consumers. So obviously there's digital fashion in terms of helping us in real life, and then there's the experiences and the identities we can explore in our virtual avatars. How do you see this world developing in terms of the consumer experience? So there's been a huge amount of brands that have jumped on the bandwagon, I guess, of talking about the metaverse and digital garments. Do you see this as the next essential frontier, I guess, for brands to engage with?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I do. I'll tell you a story. So I did a couple of talks at some of these fashion institutes. I was at the White House Institute about a month ago, and all the kids were there. And once we started talking about the simulated hyper-realistic avatars, I mean, all their eyes just opened up. And I'm like, but look at my real physical garments on the runway. They didn't even care about them. They just wanted to know about the technology, and there's an aura around it. And we're in the right time to be releasing this to the world, definitely. And I did another institute, and it was the same response. The kids were just fascinated by what they could do with the technology. It's almost limitless. So I think, like I was kind of sort of alluding to before, it's the upskilling of young designers, young creatives. I mean, the roller coaster ride that no doubt you've been on, Eugene, and I've been on, potentially could alleviate a lot of that, because it's almost creating a new economy.
I think we're talking about a world that isn't quite here yet, but it's imminent. We can all kind of see it happening very, slowly. It's been happening over the last couple of years. It's going to happen very quickly from here on in. For me, it's, obviously photorealism is really important. And Caitlin, you mentioned, in terms of rendering, and when you go into, say, a metaverse world, it looks kind of like a digital and game-like. We got the real world, right? Sort of look at Unreal Engine 5, we look at photorealistic rendering and where that's heading in the next year or 2 years. There you got a world that actually looks and smells and feels a lot more like the real world. And there things start to become more, stunning and alluring to people. You've got mixed reality, where we start to mix, digital content into our real world, into our lounge rooms. And probably AR wearables is the real watershed moment. We start to think about, what does digitally enabled fashion on physical fashion or purely digital fashion look like? Because this stuff really comes into its own when there's a true augmentation of digital and physical worlds. I think that's where you'll really see what has this all been about. You know, these boots that people potentially wear, and these jackets and things that people are buying. When you see somebody physically walking down the street with that on digitally through, you know, AR wearables, for example, you start to see an entirely different economy evolve. And so all these guys are like working on this sort of idea where it's still a bit clunky and it's still a bit separated, but we can kind of see through that hardware enablement layout what that will actually look like. And I think it'll be very quickly, very imminent future.
I think AR is like kind of the key to it here. I think AR is the gateway to the the metaverse and VR. I actually had to quickly look up the stats for because I didn't want to get it wrong. But AR try-ons with makeup and all of that's been around for 4 or 5 years now. And essentially did a study on it. I don't think it was last year. I think it was the year before. 47% of consumers say that immersive technology makes them feel more connected to the product, and that's because of the brain stimulation and the chemicals that go off when you like see yourself with the thing that's not really there, and you're like, oh wow, that does look good on me. And then there's another stat there that's really interesting is 94% increase in conversion rate for products that feature AR or 3D content. At the time, there wasn't that much fashion AR stuff out yet, but there's a lot of furniture stuff. So that stat is more for furniture, not for fashion, but it's still really interesting that when people can see a product on them or in their house, in their real environment through AR, they love it so much and they get connected to it and then they buy it. It's cool.
Yeah, which leads us, Caitlin, to the next thing. So we've been mucking around a lot with 3D body scan technology through your mobile. And so you can see the garment, you can purchase the garment, and we send you a link to body scan, and then we can custom make you a beautiful gown or a beautiful, blazer. I won't blazer guy, but a blazer from that simulated garment. You see, so I think that it's like, I agree with everybody. It's the blend, taking metaverse asset into the real world and vice versa, is where you're going to see the kaboom. But and that's a big educational piece for the people outside. This panel, I guess, to understand that's where the future is. Yeah.
Daniel, are you looking into that stuff at the moment? Because you should definitely check out Christine Marzano. She's a ex-model turned actress turned CEO of BODS, and they're doing the digital body and the clothes fitting stuff. They work on mostly the avatar stuff, so maybe there's a cool collaboration or something there.
Yeah, no, we've been doing it for a few years. So a couple of the red carpet pieces we've been doing in Australia, the clients have body scanned, and we've made them a red carpet dress in like 2 weeks. And it's through the body scan technology, we get all their measurements. So my team, my factories are able to then custom make the garment from the design. So I agree. But again, like you were saying, it's a bit clunky at the moment, but I think once we can streamline that process and make it, end to end, and once real-time rendering does come, it gets to the level where it should be, it's an amazing future, right? So that's the new norm. We'll all be sitting in here, in our, custom-made.
No, we're not wearing digital clothing here.
There's an interesting question, maybe for you, Eugene and Daniel, is, do you think people will want to enter this blended world where they'll want to dress digitally like they do physically? Do you see this kind of thing where somebody will go, well, now I'm in this photo real world, it'd be really great to have digital fashion. And I also got the physical versions of these things. When I go out the door, normally and physically, I'm wearing my identity, because people associate identity so strongly with fashion. Or do you think it's going to fork completely in different directions? People are going to have these totally different digital avatars and lives to their physical.
No, thanks to COVID, I think that we have this corporate new norm at the moment, where 60% of people are in their offices and the rest of the time they're, sort of Zoom calling. So, it's what they project in front of the camera. If they could wear a digital, dress or a digital jacket, I think it adds to the person's personality. It's almost image enhancing, and image enhancing is a massive thing in fashion moving forward as well, you see. So, and I think social media with COVID, it's where we've got to now, I think, is this point where I think that definitely you're going to have the blend. So,
and I guess, how does that work? It comes back to my question about NFTs and digital garments. How does one actually use these garments that they buy online? Are they largely stuck within a platform, or are we near the space where someone can take that garment across platforms and use it in their Zoom calls and then use it in a Google Meet call or a Teams call, and then take it into the platforms, or are they still very roadblocked and locked at this stage?
I'm gonna let Darren answer it because he knew Ready Player Me, and that got me so excited that someone else knew it.
It's a little bit roadblocking. There's people working on it to actually solve it from sort of a centralized avatar assets point of view. So at the moment, you've got different platforms that you're sort of buying and vending these things on and storing them on. And I think the answer to that is, places like Ready Player Me. I have no association with them. I just love the work that they're doing, because it's like, well, if I buy it over here, what's the point of it just being stuck over here in this little ecosystem? Like, it works really well on like massive platforms like Fortnite, right? Roblox. There's just so much that you can kind of do with an asset in that ecosystem. But if you buy it in some sort of fringe ecosystem where you got a Splendor XR and it's like a throwaway after that, it's kind of like, well, what's the value and why am I going to spend money on this? So yeah, I think at the moment, really, really fragmented, but I think we'll see convergence around the use of these digital assets, particularly stored in blockchain, NFTs and the like.
And can you, for those of us who aren't as familiar, can you give us a little bit of background about what this Ready Player Me is? We're both so excited.
It's just essentially a place to design, customize basically your avatar and your avatar digital wear and accessorization. I mean, think about the customization that happens in a game, but that sits within like a game ecosystem, Call of Duty or Fortnite. It's kind of a centralized version of this avatar creation, identity creation, and dressing, etc., which then has APIs and ways to kind of plug into other ecosystems. So that then enables you to kind of take that, essentially curate that identity, and then port it into other online gaming worlds, metaverse worlds, VR, AR, potentially filters on calls. So yeah,
it's actually so great for game developers as well, because instead of coming up with your own whole avatar system, you can just use their SDK. You're giving your players their identity and stuff, and you don't have to worry about building it out. It's fantastic.
Have you seen how much time kids spend customizing a character? Anyone, like when they start a game, right? It's like, for me, I'm like, I just want to like jump in and play the game. But most people sit there and it's like an hour customizing the character before they jump into the game. And you're right, like that's kind of like, people love the sense of ownership that they get out of it. And so with that kind of sitting over in sort of a platform like Ready Player Me, it takes that onus off developers, but it means that avatar can be ported into different worlds. I mean, we were looking at building a interactive VR music streaming platform, Metaverse Play, and just like the whole idea of building an avatar system in that didn't make sense, because who's going to spend time doing that for a couple of concerts over here? So yeah, I think stuff like that will really accelerate the value of what we're seeing with like digital fashion and NFTs.
Can I add something like super left field to this as well? Because you brought up the Splendor thing. So Splendor used a platform called Sensor, which I hadn't actually used before, but I've been to a few concerts on it since, and I can rewear all the outfits that I bought for Splendor, which was great because I spent too much money. But one thing that I noticed that when I was customizing my avatar and spending all my money, all of the actual Splendor merch wasn't part of that set of clothes that I got to actually buy at the start. So when I got into the festival, I had no money left budgeted for that sort of thing. But then there was a merch stand. So it actually adds this whole other layer of how do you market in the digital world and how do you sell in the digital world that people aren't quite thinking about yet because it's so new. But if you can kind of hit that nail on the head, you're set,
Yeah, I guess this comes to the point of, from a brand perspective, where is the bottom line? Do you feel like these digital worlds and the effort, obviously, and the time that it takes to invest in these spaces, from a brand perspective, is it valuable? Do you kind of see it translating across to their bottom line?
Yeah. Well, Daniel and Eugene are best placed, but I'm just going to say, like, seriously, if you're not in this space, I just don't know, like, just to purely be in the space, even for the buzz value, right, is enough as it is at the moment without doing something practical. But like, over to you, Daniel and Eugene, you guys are like literally working in the space.
Yeah. So from our side, I think personal brand development, and I wrote this, I scribbled this down, and real image enhancement is becoming a preference for all professionals. You see, so I think that bringing, I guess, the digital and obviously the real world together is what the world, the consumer wants. It's that individualism and being able to express their style, and as well as enhance their, their brand, their personal brand. That's where it used to be. Brands would show their collections to the world, like it or don't like it. But I think it's now we're kind of closing that gap. And obviously we're talking about a new economy down the track in 3 or 4 years' time, when someone come up with a React-native AI app that will basically destabilize or disrupt the entire global retail marketplace. So when all these technologies do come together, so that's what I think.
Yeah. For me, I think it's actually quite good but I think then you have a better perspective on this because you're doing physical fashion and digital fashion at the same time. For me, I've been stopping the physical fashion and dive all in the digital world for a couple of years. But I'm going back to physical fashion, so I know what happens. But during the past 2 years, when I'm purely just making CG runway show, showing things in the CG kind of format, I find it very easy for me to collaborate with people around the world. And it's very easy for me to showcase my work overseas as well. I think I have more feedback from overseas than back in Australia. And I have no idea why. Maybe we are sort of still a little bit behind because we don't really have the platform that specialize in fashion films for digital fashions. Recently, we won an award in Berlin. We won the digital fashion in Berlin Fashion Film Festival. We don't have that in here, but there's a lot of festival already have the category for digital fashion, digital manga, things like that. So I think it's for our brand, it's quite valuable because it gives us a lot of opportunity to expose to the global world. And we know so many friends, we have so many collaborations, and a lot of people approaching us for projects and stuff since after I do the CG film thing.
Interesting. Yeah.
And I guess again, this probably comes back to Eugene and Daniel. Do you see digital fashion as purely being almost like a prototype? So I know Forever 21 recently released a series of specialized beanies. Was it in Roblox, I think? And these sold out. I think they sold more than like $15 million for these digital beanies, that they've now actually used that as a case study to produce the same beanies in real life. And so not only did it like cost them nothing to come up with the design, they almost had a fantastic little like consumer test, I guess, and they are now capitalizing across to physicality.
Yes.
Do we see that kind of being a utility towards the digitization of fashion? Or is it go above and beyond, I guess? Is it about something more than money and the monetization of fashion?
I think it'd be really good to like define for the audience what is utility. Because if you are talking about just like what can you do with something, there's so many endless possibilities. But I think it's very wise to be clear that in the NFT world, utility is giving your NFT not just value money, but actually something that you can do with it. Like, does it give you access to something? Does it give you voting rights? That sort of thing. The utility of an NFT fashion item isn't necessarily wear it on your avatar, which is really crazy to think about, but it's not actually always that. Yeah, and it's definitely something that a lot of fashion people, when they're talking to me about it and go like, oh yeah, the utility of this, I'm like, oh, you're using this in the wrong context, because if you're speaking about it from an NFT perspective, it's not wearing it in real life. That being said, I realize that people are literally selling NFTs for real life garments. I am on the fence and I don't know how I feel about this at the moment, but feel free for anyone else to chuck out some opinions on that.
I think the confusion is it's so blended, I guess, right? It's digital. So you can conceptualize these garments, NFTs, or the word digital fashion in so many different ways. Do you guys feel that, are we almost thinking ahead of our abilities? We keep talking about, Web3, everyone's talking about Web3, but no one can agree on what Web3 is. And are we just in semantics at the moment? Do we need to wait for the technology to catch up to where our brains are?
I think you need to participate in design for the future. So I think absolutely everybody should be operating or doing something within this space. I get what you're saying, Caitlin, like the utility can mean many, many different things now. You really got to flip it on its head. So we talk about digital fashion. That can mean a lot of different things, and we want to apply the utility of that in the real world and back into the digital world. You know, the value of being in this space is really more about what's coming down the track and what's emerging. And there's like a lot of big sort of players happening in the AR and the VR space, the metaverse space, where these things will kind of come to fruition and start to make more sense in the next 12 and 24 months. And so you really got to kind of start that journey now. And I think we'll see a lot of that sort of coming to light. Like everyone's still experimenting and playing around and doing cool stuff, and we're kind of all seeing what's possible. But it's a little bit like saying, I don't know, like 15, 20 years ago, well, you don't need to have like a mobile website. Like that's just like, that stuff's never going to take off. Like those phones are like Fringe or whatever else. Things can change really, really quickly, and they are changing really, really quickly on the hardware front and on the ecosystem front. So, you know, participating and building within the space and thinking about what's possible and what you can do different within it. That's the more important thing about saying, well, shouldn't I be in this space? There's no doubt that people will want to connect and work in a fluid digital and physical like future. That's absolutely, it's the world now. It's just the fact that we're all living through 2D screens, right? So yeah, think about the three-dimensionalization of digital content as kind of the next evolution of the way in which we live our lives through digital as we do today.
Everyone should just like have a go and try it, hey, because it's like actually the nicest industry. Everyone's learning. No one's an expert at anything. It's too new. Everyone is learning and everyone's welcoming and everyone wants to share their knowledge. It's decentralized knowledge.
It really seems to be that way. And I guess if we come back to the concept of like consumers and brands, you were talking about AR wearables, Darren. Can you give me some more insight about what they are and how would they actually augment a individual's experience of fashion or their experience of a particular brand in fashion?
I'm just thinking about, you know, if you got AR wearables like AR glass, right, you're talking about a world that's consistently activated with digital content. It's almost like that Back to the Future moment with the shark that comes out, you know, it's like a holographic world if you can kind of look at it that way. But fashion that is activated in AR that responds digitally, digital extensions to physical gowns. You know, gowns and streetwear that promotes a message or a story or an identity or something else. This is happening in a kind of fluid, consistent state around you. So, you know, people wear fashion to make a statement and to assert their identity. And then that fashion as a physical anchor can become something that is then a digital extension in terms of what people believe in or who they are. Yeah, I was talking about an MR installation. This is right off track, but somebody wanted to make an MR installation where they sit in a room and everyone's got animal heads on. We're talking about like anchoring the AR animal heads and replacing the real heads and stuff like that. And I was just kind of thinking, well, this real world probably looks a little bit like that down the track where you're walking down the street and somebody's got, you know, I don't know, like huge fairy wings on that are flapping. I mean, it's kind of beautiful and it's quite interesting. But yeah, it's more the augmentation of something physical as a marker with digital content.
One of the things I guess where most consumers might be aware of this is the somewhat failed campaign of Google Glass. I remember, you know, it was 2015, 2016. I was living in New York at the time, and you did see people walking around with these specialized glasses, but they were kind of seen as social pariahs at the time anyway, about privacy concerns and the real blending. Do you guys have any thoughts on that and why Google Glass didn't take off as they anticipated that it would?
I'm going to say like the tech wasn't quite there, and no, not failed, just stalled, right? Like all technology, it just takes a couple of boots to get going. So is VR and, you know, everything else that we've enjoyed today and take for granted. It's just taken a lot of like failed attempts and hard yards. I think it's a no-brainer, right? I've always said like the mobile phone is the most unnatural thing to use. You go to a concert and people are not in the moment. They're up there holding their phones, wanting to record moments. And so if you can take the common needs that you have to pull this thing out and kind of look at it, tap at it like, you know, a heathen, and have this as a more fluid experience where you got your hands free and you're present in the moment and you're able to actually enjoy digital information and content. That's why wearables has like such an inherent future in terms of technology. I actually think people will consider mobile phones in about 6 to 8 years as being like archaic and weird and rude to have out, which is a flipping of what you're saying, right? Because people are like, oh, you got those glasses on, you're being a pariah, you're being, are you observing me? Are you recording me? It's just funny how normal can shift in the world, like really, really quickly.
Depending on how we all uptake it.
Yeah, or depending on what the benefit is, right? Versus what you give up. Social media, right? People give up their personal information in order to communicate.
Yeah. And I guess one of the flip sides we talk about a lot with digital fashion is this concept of sustainability and its ability to remove a lot of carbon costs of shipping samplings and stuff like that, which we've already touched on. But there is a flip side to blockchain technology, which is obviously the huge considerations of energy that is consumed in the mining of certain cryptocurrencies. How do you all kind of feel about that sort of split between sustainability of reducing carbon, but then also the carbon cost of using these digital technologies?
Depends what chain you're using. With the most NFTs are done on Ethereum, and Ethereum just went through its big merge thing. So yeah, it's gone from proof of work to proof of staking, which essentially cuts out mining and the whole really bad part of it. Yeah, it's definitely, the conception of it's really bad for the environment. We're comparing an industry that like has so much throwaway fast fashion and sweatshop workers making a lot of the cheap fashion that's chucked in to the waterways. I think it's like very weird to compare those two. I think blockchain's made more strides into the right direction than fashion has in the last 20 years or something. So digital fashion. Woo.
Mind you, Caitlin, I mean, before COVID, I was a frequent traveler to China. Even China was changing, going from, these massive factories to almost robotic style custom making at critical mass. So they see that as the future. We obviously produce mostly in Australia these days, but, you're seeing the change and the shift to smart manufacturing happen in places like, China, where a lot of the time it has been what you've just said, you got the sweatshops, and it's sad to see all that, but it's good to see that, even they're thinking about changing their workflows and their manufacturing processes, as we are trying to do it here. But unfortunately in Australia, everyone left Australia in our industry 30 or 40 years ago. So just to upskill and reskill the local, hopefully it happens soon, but it'll take a bit of time, to happen. So
I get the computational needs for mining, right? Bitcoin, Ethereum, and like that is a huge concern, and like the whole sustainability question like folds out of that. But like nobody said anything about like Netflix, YouTube, like all these like massive online services that are computationally hungry and we've been using for the last 10 or 15 years, and waste our time and efforts on. And it's like, well, we're not having a discussion about, I don't know, computational power and resources over on that side, but we are about sort of blockchain and decentralization. It just seems a little bit jilted. And blockchain's early technologies, more or less, it's kind of evolving and coming up with better ways to be able to do this, removing the mining equation. What it provides in benefits far outweighs like some of these concerns that can be addressed in the nature of the design of blockchain itself, and that is being addressed.
Yeah, I can see that the blockchains, in terms of like energy consumption, can improve faster than the problems with fast fashion. One is to do with technology, improvement in technology. The other thing is human behavior improvement. It's two different things, I think.
Yeah.
I think also around that space of sustainability, there was a period, and it still probably is now, where fast fashion is still, fueling our need for newness, and we all want to look different in our Instagram posts. One of the things is at DressX that where you can superimpose these garments onto your Instagram filters, which I find so fascinating. And do you feel that that will replace the need for this constant newness, or do you think it's just going to supplement it?
I think it helps a lot. In our experience, that people actually really like the idea of doing that um, camera shots like screenware thing, because it's quite efficient. You see something you like, you pay, and then you get it on a photograph, and then you can put it on your Instagram, and you don't have to go and buy a piece of clothing, take photos, put it on, and throw it away. I think it works quite efficiently. I think more and more people will embrace this technology and this idea of screenware or this idea of digital fashion.
Another aspect to it as well is when you're trying stuff on in AR, or if you're simulating what it's actually going to look like on your actual body, the returns are a lot less. So you don't have that big waste of returns that you can't resell and end up in the bin, or have to resell again, sort of thing. So there's the decline in returns.
Great. And Caitlin and guys, I think once 3D fashion, right now it's 3D fashion on 2D, but once you've got metahuman style technology evolved to the point, I think that will definitely, obviously change consumer preferencing and how they're shopping. And metahumans it's actually, as you guys probably already know, it's you and me. The digital form looks like us, feels like, acts like us, sort of thing. So once that technology does get there, I think that will be quite amazing for the consumer experience. And I agree with you, Caitlin. I think, getting those, right now, I think online sales as a consortium is circa almost 30%. If we can get that to sub 10%, that will obviously sustainably save a lot in the environment. So, yeah, agreed.
Huge amount. I guess I know we're running closer to our time. I've got kind of two more questions, and then I do have some questions that have come through on Instagram. So if anyone in the audience does have any additional questions, please feel free to drop them into the chat. But I guess one of my last questions is about the concept of these digital garments. And how do you feel consumers are going to engage in digital fashion? Do you think it's going to be like a replication of their physical selves, or do we see them being more avant-garde, more extravagant in the digital sphere?
I think both directions will happen, because obviously some people are just fascinated by how the digital self looks identical to themselves, and some people just like to create crazy or different species version of themselves. So I think both will. Yeah, it really depends on the personal preference. I think both will happen.
Yeah, I think a lot of digital fashion is only being commercialized, I guess, to create an experience. I think, but in the broader sense and moving forward, I think it's about people's lifestyle and image that they can create through it is where, and like I was sort of alluding to before, with once metahuman fashion try-on really takes off and the technology, we get that right, then like I said, you're going to have a new economy and a new customer experience. So I think it's just, we're working on it. So.
And I guess that ties back to one of my earlier questions, which is this concept of digital models, digital influencers. I know, Caitlin, you had some thoughts on that, and Eugene and Daniel, you guys have obviously created your own digital models. Like, what is the perspective? What perspective do you come to the development phase with? What's going through your mind when you're thinking about these digital models, or realizing your garments in the digital sphere?
I think as a creator for a brand and designing clothing, with avatars, I can create avatars myself as well, and I think that experience is kind of interesting. I think the role of digital model and physical model are pretty much the same, in terms of like they both help the brand, helps the brand shape their identity and tell the stories. So I think their roles are pretty much the same, but with digital ones, designers can create their own avatars. I think that's the interesting part of it.
We're not trying to take models' jobs away from them. I mean, I saw all the comments on that Instagram post. We're trying to. We got trolled. All the haters. But yeah, so we're trying to create a new sustainable future with digital fashion, you know, to complement the physical, you know. So I think I agree with you, Eugene. I think we're able to do that now with the technology that we've got at our fingertips. So
yeah. I think it will go hand in hand together. I don't think one will threaten the other or take away the work of the other. I think they both just coexist. Just like I think cryptocurrency and real currency will coexist. It's just how both works together and how you translate one to another. Because in a digital film or in a digital presentation, you can have both real models and digital models. Same as in the physical kind of environment, you can still have digital models as well, just like what Daniel did. So I think both digital and physical can coexist together in a real good way.
Yeah, I agree, and this will potentially open the door. We're talking about avatars and designing digital garments, but we haven't even talked about virtual retail yet and virtual showrooms. And I think that's the big kaboom. That's not a disruptor. That's going to be an add-on. I mean, at our show, Eugene, at Fashion Week, you probably saw, we opened the show with a DA New York City virtual retail store where we flew in with a 3D camera into the store and all the garments you can buy. Cheap rent, I had a store in New York. But yeah, I think virtual retail is potentially a new frontier that will come once we get this part of the workflow right, as will virtual showrooms, through digital representations on avatars. Like I sort of alluded to, my ex-business, my business partner, he's in his old life, he would create, like, I think it was 9,000 sets of samples, Eugene, into 35 countries. That's how big his business was. And this way we can create one sample and show it through a virtual showroom, and it doesn't work. Oh well, press delete. So that's the utopia for designers, I guess, in many ways. One of them. So
I guess that's a fantastic space to, I guess, conclude the more formal part. There's so much we could delve into. I know we haven't touched on virtual fashion retail that much, but I'm getting a lot of questions through Instagram and through the chat. I'm trying to manage the digital world right now, and so I definitely want to honor that. So I'm just going to pull it up quickly. We've had some really fantastic questions. I guess one of our questions here says, does the metaverse promote a lifestyle that takes away from the real world? So yeah, do you guys think there's a pro or a con, or is it purely this digital experience?
Caitlin's loaded on this one. I saw that mute come off. Go for it.
I don't think so at all. I think actually it's just another avenue to interact with other people. Where I'm living, it's so remote, and I get really bored here. I don't really go out very often, but I can jump into VR and I can play poker with my friends, or I can go and watch a concert with my friends, and it's they're right there. I can see their movements, when they're dancing, I'll start dancing as well. I probably look like an idiot in my lounge room, but I feel like I'm there with them. And I don't feel like I have to be in there all the time. I'll jump out, have dinner, hang out with my dog, jump in there again. And it doesn't feel, actually it feels more social than just sitting there watching TV. And so many people do that for hours every night. So it's interesting like that.
I think also people have this idea of what's normal or what's the real world for them, and then they judge everybody else by that lens. I mean, the idea here is that people live the life that they want to live, and if this is good for them or normal for them, or they enjoy that, everybody likes something different. So sometimes you'll see, people, Metaverse is promoting out of touch with the real world, and people do this. The real world is, defined by somebody's own perspective of what they like and what they enjoy. And if somebody loves going to the football and bars and everything else, that's great. And some other people love sitting streaming TV. Some people love online gaming. Some people love VR. Some people love metaverse worlds. And I just think all of that kind of irons out. People gravitate to what feels natural and good for them. And that's kind of an underpinning concept of freedom.
I love that. I guess it is, because when we're all sitting there watching the latest Crown episodes, as I'm obsessed with at the moment, it's very one-dimensional. We're just receiving information. Do you feel there will be an influx of technology into the home to help us with that interactivity in the virtual world? I know there's, for example, Peloton, the online gym. They've recently brought out a camera that can track you while you're doing your movements to make sure that you're in the realms. Do you guys see something like that happening to enable us to better interact in the metaverse, or is it still going to be behind a screen?
Oh, it's all motion tracked. I mean, really, and that's what kind of MR and Quest Meta Pro and all these sort of headsets are kind of going to promote, is that kind of mixed worlds where you probably won't have a TV in like 2, 3, 4 years, right? From the headset, you'll see screens, it'll be 2D content, it'll be 3D content, you'll have your friends there, you'll play table tennis, you'll switch to poker with Caitlin, she'll still be over in somewhere near Perth, in a way matter. But yeah, this idea that you're kind of like switching zones and environments very, very seamlessly, that will kind of come through next generation headsets. One thing you haven't mentioned, sorry, and I don't want to put this off stream, and it wasn't mentioned at all, but I think it's a huge, I'm a technologist. The one thing that scares the hell out of me is AI and AI generated art and AI generated movies now. And it's moving so damn quickly. You'll see AI generated fashion, AI generated movies. I mean, it's probably 5 to 8 years from now, you'll be able to put it on a version of Netflix and it will make a movie up for you. Somebody won't make that movie, right? And we're kind of heading into that world. That's the kind of scary part of the technology side, where, who is designing these things? Like right now, the designers are in control. So
there is that scope. My team, so for those of you who are listening, I look after the communications for the masters, but I also run a digital marketing agency where we do digital ads for other brands. And we now use this technology called Jasper, which is terrifying because it has templates that if you're creating a Facebook ad, if you're creating a Google ad, you put in your product, your variants, and you say you want it to be witty, or you say you want it to be educational, and it spits out these fantastic headlines. And time and again, I like to think of myself as quite a good copywriter, but this AI it's bloody good, excuse my French. And it is.
There's AI just actually generating video now. I mean, that's come out in the last couple of weeks. It's been going on in the background. Like from a couple of words, it literally generates a video, an original piece of video. And so they're already saying in 2 or 3 years, we might see AI generated short films in film festivals as a category. And then it's a short leap down the track where you turn on Netflix and say, I want to see a movie about a dog that swims underwater and encounters an octopus, and it makes the movie up for you, and it's your movie. Nobody else sees it. Sorry, that's a side rail, but I think the AI thing's the scary.
I'd be way more worried about like AI taking jobs of people than digital avatars. Hey.
It's the design, it's the creative stuff. I thought we were like a long way away from AI taking away the creativity side, but some of the stuff I'm seeing synthesized is like scary.
I guess that's one of the questions that has come up here. One of the questions was, what are the benefits of digital fashion? I guess conversely, what are some of the drawbacks? So I guess that kind of AI taking jobs away, or the reduction of jobs, I guess, Caitlin, again, the rise of digital models, will that limit the opportunities for physical models? I guess, what do you guys see as the benefits and the cons, I guess, of this new emerging area?
There's new jobs created all the time in this area. I mean, I know people now who like their job is to sit in these platforms and make sure people have a lovely experience, and they get paid just as much as people like with degrees. I'm like, that's sick. That didn't exist a few years ago. Community managers and stuff like that, that was really only a job in the games industry. Now it's something that like a lot of brands have because they have a digital presence and they need someone in real time being the face to the community, not just like the marketing team. I think there's always going to be loss of types of jobs, but there's new jobs created as well, and you just got to be prepared to pivot, because if you don't follow it, you're going to get stuck behind, and that's no matter what industry. We're just in the one that's going the fastest forward.
Yeah, Caitlin, I agree with you. In the fashion industry, in the back end of it is, a designer creates an idea, an inspiration, and they create a 2D technical drawing. Then they give it to a pattern maker. Then they create a sample, and this all costs time and money. And then if you've got like a dozen people in the back room all doing that, but upskilling them with this new technology and this new workflow will save us, or saves all brands many, many costs in that long, arduous process. And we stop having to create all that wastage in sampling, like we've talked about it before, to then trying to produce these samples. We can see it digitally and then decide whether or not. And then thanks to social media and the whole world collectively on it, we can then pick a trend, like I said, in real time, and then be able to create that and go that way rather than decide what way to go. So the day will come when the React Native app will be created, and hopefully it doesn't have too much AI in it, but you know, it will create a new efficient way for people to experience, you know, fashion, I guess, you know, so new customers.
Sorry, go, Daniel.
I also think, though, there's this idea of, you know, a craft is a craft, right? And so that craft, what excites me about what's going on with the metaverse is we're talking about inherently 3D worlds, and those 3D worlds need to be built. They haven't been built yet. And so an architect in the real world can port into a metaverse architect, a designer, you know, an urban planner, you know, all these sorts of skills can port, because it's the skill and the craft that counts and the knowledge that goes with it. The tool is different, the environment's different. And so this is what we're saying about fashion. Fashion designer in the physical world can also be the best fashion designer in the digital world. Those skills port over, the sentiments and the things that make fashion great, a good fashion sense, also exist in that world. And it's the same with everything else that's got to be built. So I think, you know, all of the artists and creatives can find, you know, meaningful skills and new jobs in this new metaverse economy, like builders, set designers, whatever.
I mean, with a 3D configurator these days, we can take a suit, a men's suit, and then have 2,000 configurations of that suit. So we're talking about image enhancement and brand enhancement, and, you know, obviously creating that image for yourself. With this technology, we don't have to create all these suits and go, oh, cross my fingers, hope customer's going to buy it. Give the access to the customer to be able to configure their own suit to their own style. And then, you know, throw in the 3D body scanning so they can customize the fit, and then all of a sudden you've got a new customer experience, you know. And I think that's the beautiful thing. So instead of having to do 4 seasons a year, you can do a new season every 2 weeks.
Wow.
So, and it's sustainable. So, you know, this is why it's so important, I think. So
That's
Even taking the, like, using your skills as a traditional designer into like this real-time fashion or simulated fashion type of thing, you can even get into movies in this way. A couple of months ago, I was working on a short film where I had to jump in and do the outfits for the characters, and I studied fashion design for like 2 months. Wasn't my thing. I'm going to stick to tech, but I was like, how do I do a sleeve pattern again? Oh yeah, that's right. And I like took all of those skills I learned from that into like this 3D task that I was doing. And then once I created it for one character, I put it on the others, put on their measurements, just hit a button, and then boom, 4 very different body shapes all wearing the same outfit, all simulating how they shoot on that body type. And yeah, I didn't even do that good in fashion design. Clearly, I'm in tech still, but the yeah, like taking those skills, it's not hard to port the skills that we already have and just future-proof them.
absolutely. And that's what it is. Digital design opens the fashion market to a much bigger creative hub. You know, how many young designers finish from fashion schools, but they don't have the money, or they don't have the connection, or they don't have the confidence to give it a go. Or those who do, they borrow money from mum and dad and the bank and the overdraft, and then 3 seasons and, you know, they're out, you know. And it's sad because there's so much innovation, so much creativity, and that's who I care a lot about. And obviously when I put my real-time fashion cap on, that's what it's all about. It's those young designers who, you know, want to give creativity a go, and, you know, they don't know how to start. They don't have a CFO, they don't have a CEO, they don't have a CTO, or you know, 8,000 people working for them overseas, you know. So how can they compete? So
I love that point. Sorry, Daniel, but this is this grassroots kind of thing, right? That people don't need a large amount of infrastructure in order to be able to enter and practice craft. And, you know, fashion, like there's a lot of industries that are saturated, difficult to enter into. I'm not in the fashion industry, but I imagine it's quite difficult, pretentious, complicated, expensive, and all of these things. Whereas you've got this greenfields, new frontier where somebody who's got a good idea and can study a little bit and kind of practice their craft a bit can carve out an name for themselves and make their own kind of print, right? And so I just think we should look at it like as breaking down some barriers. So you got your Louis Vuittons and everyone else in this sort of metaverse space. They've got tons and deep pockets. But funnily enough, what I've always loved about tech is somebody on their own with with enough knowledge can do as much as an impressive some large deep pocketed organization can, just with a bit of ingenuity and design, working with the right people. So it really levels the playing field. You don't need to, own on Fifth Avenue a large store to be able to kind of like reach and get a peak market out there in digital.
Agreed. And that's exactly, like, you could be a designer, Caitlin. Everyone could be. And then I think that's all about that creativity and seeing collectively where creativity could go that way. When we were I was growing up in the 90s, I had like maybe 200 friends, and that was my radius of my ecosystem of people I knew. But social media, has enabled, I guess, the world collectively to have thousands and thousands of friends, and be able to touch all these different connections or audiences, So I think, this is the world we're living in today. And I agree with you. I think if we can encourage more innovation and more creativity, the world tomorrow will be a more interesting, definitely more interesting a place. So that's where I come from.
This ties in, I think you guys are obviously reading my mind or our attendees' minds. One of the questions that has come up here is, was it difficult upskilling into digital fashion, and what have your personal experiences been like? And I guess you're kind of touching on that, right? Like what would your advice be to emerging creatives who want to kind of tap into this space?
You can go.
It took me a few years to really know how to do everything I wanted to do. But I think the first thing is to learn how to do digital pattern making and avatars. But now it's a lot easier than a few years ago. It was. I remember like 4 or 5 years ago when I first started looking to this, it's like rocket science. It's pretty hard to make anything, but now it's a lot easier. And I think it works because, with the CG film or with digital clothing and digital avatars, you can place camera and showing pretty much the same story that will take millions of dollars to make, but now you can actually do it in the computer. You can do it. It tells the same story. So I think it works.
Yeah, I agree with you, Eugene. I think a lawyer can become a designer. An influencer can extend their influence, I guess, because, they've got this million followers on Instagram, but it gives them an opportunity to be able to commercialize that with their own products. Not have to obviously just partner with other brands and whatnot. So they need the support, and that's where this digital, I guess, workflow and opportunities enable. Asking the question is, what has it been like to be a designer for all these years? It's been really hard. I come from a single mom. I just wanted to win. I couldn't give up, so I just kept going, and the roller coaster ride's been real. I love the journey. It was me and against a big box Australian retailer at one time, David and Goliath, and I fell over, but I got up again and dusted myself off. But I think that's the opportunity that digital enables that. You don't have to go that way. You can, but you can go this way. So I think it's very important.
I agree.
There's a broader question there as well, where anyone can upskill into this. And I think the hub of the question, and Caitlin mentioned it earlier, the community is really open, excited. Most of the stuff that people are sort of building in terms of digital fashion, AR, VR, and everything else, it's kind of it's open source. You don't need a lot of money to get started. You do need to study, and connect with the right people. But I think you'll find that most people are kind of excited on this frontier, willing to share knowledge. There's great forums you can connect with. So if the question is, how do you kind of upskill into this? Like, a lot of it's open source. Like, there's great institutes you can go and study at, but you got to connect with people and kind of do some online learning, get onto community forums, and just keep an eye on what's going on and be inspired.
And so you thinking, you mentioned obviously there's formal ways, as we mentioned in our video, the University of Creative Arts in the UK now have a master's in digital fashion. I know in our Bachelor of Fashion Business, we have a whole unit in the 3rd year, which is all about digital fashion experiences, metaverse. Do you think people need to, obviously it's important for those coming up to have that kind of basis, but if you're wanting to get into this space, do you think people need the formal education, or do you think you can just jump into those online resources, and what would those be?
I never even finished high school, and I dropped out of every degree and course I've ever done. I don't think I've just honestly finished a single one. I jump onto the next thing too quickly. I'm like, oh, that looks fun. Let's go. There's so much free stuff on YouTube, heaps. A lot of the actual software that we use to create stuff have a tutorials or a learn section as well. There's a lot of free software to get you started, and the ones that are paid usually offer some sort of like trial period. I think one thing to remember though is like, don't think that you can do it all straight off the bat. Just pick one thing and try that.
Yeah.
If it's not what you're enjoying, or you're just getting too stuck and your brain's not doing, try something else.
Yeah.
Don't dive into the deep end, because you will probably drown if you have zero experience. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I just want everyone to try a little bit and get a good taste of it. Don't drown.
Well,
Jump into the fun bit.
Yeah, I think online resource. Oh, you go.
Look what Canva's done for designing from home, for example. Fashion needs a similar platform, I guess, in many ways, to support designers to be able to go through that pipeline. So I think that's the platform is what's needed for the designers to learn from. Yeah, young designers and established designers. It doesn't exist yet, so.
Yeah, I think online resources is very good. We basically learn anything from online resource, and I think Caitlin is right. You have to really start small and not thinking you can build a lot of things in the first place. Me, I've been quite naive, and I've been having this perspective of building the films and everything, so it took me longer, and faced a lot of obstacles during the few years learning. But I think if you start simple, 1 or 2 skills, you can already do a lot. So I think everybody can actually do it. Everyone just go online and read a few tutorials. You can start doing things straight away. Yeah.
That ties into another question that's popped up here, which I think is quite interesting, which is how would someone who isn't a gamer but wants to experience the metaverse go about it? What would you recommend? Very open-ended.
Depends what you consider the metaverse. I don't think
There's the
one
big question,
answer,
Caitlin.
yeah.
Like, what is the metaverse? Nobody here actually knows.
What is the meaning of life? What is
Where
the
is this metaverse? Please show me what it is. No, what is a metaverse, Caitlin?
That is part of the challenge, right? Is that to the
$1 million question.
Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, where they ask what the meaning of life is, and I think they say it's like something. It's like a random number, but for the average consumer, or for people who aren't heavily immersed in this space, the metaverse, it sounds so confusing. There's so many different, like we said, platforms. If for someone who, say, has no experience with this space, but is interested in experiencing virtual environments, engaging with fashion, how would you suggest they go about it? What would be kind of like your ABC of, you must check this out, and this out?
I think to start with, broaden your search, your Google search thing. Don't specifically look for a metaverse experience. Look for digital fashion shows and digital things, and ease yourself into it that way. If you look for metaverse stuff, you will probably find a lot of blockchain projects that promise a metaverse and are not delivering, because they realize how big a job that is to build out whole metaverses. I'm not saying they're all not delivering, but there is a lot of junk out there. Find the stuff that's been built and test it out. Jump on Roblox. If there's people out there whose kids are on Roblox, jump on it with them. It's fun. Just jump into all those things that you hear your kids talk about, really, because they're already in it. They're already playing with it.
Good place to check out, maybe South by Southwest, right? And they run an XR channel as well. They've got an XR stream. So look up South by Southwest in the XR stream, and they have a ton of things that they exhibit and show and that you can kind of tap into online. It's a good place to see like emerging experimental art and film and a whole bunch of stuff that's kind of happening. I think people use the word metaverse to describe something that's happening in 3D on a computer, which is a bit weird to me because this has been going on for a very, very long time. And online gaming and so forth has been huge. So fashion shows, right? Like look up for XR and online fashion shows. A couple have been mentioned in the thread or at the start of the the talk. So a ton of places, look up hashtags on LinkedIn, tune into those things, see what people are posting. There's a ton of stuff going on. Don't really need much though. You can do it with your phone, do it with your computer. Great if you own a VR headset. It's a great way to kind of get this idea of what spatial content looks like when experienced.
Can you explain a bit more, Darren? What is a VR headset?
Well, virtual reality headset, just like a Meta Quest. There we go. Thank you, Caitlin, demonstrating. Put it on. That is a Meta Quest 2, not an Oculus Quest 2, as you incorrectly referred to it earlier, Caitlin.
Sorry.
Yeah. So like a Meta Quest 2, there's a manufacturer called Pico that makes some more budget headsets, like a little bit lower end market, but still good. There's $200, $300, $400. Chuck the headset on and you experience spatial content. This whole idea for me, though, the metaverse is spatial content, right? Spatial compute content. And that means content that's projected into 3 dimensions, either in the physical world or around you. And that's different to what you'd experience in a normal flat 2D screen economy. So get a VR headset, go to zero latency. They do VR arcade games in most capital cities as well. There's some cool places to check out.
That's where it's like Dark Zone, right? Where you're in an empty room, but you're shooting people virtually.
Well, you all put on VR headsets and you're meant to shoot zombies, but the first thing you instinctively do is try and shoot all your mates. And I don't know why everybody does that. It just says something about human nature, doesn't it? Yeah. Like going and like checking that out. Like don't do the things that are in the shopping centers. That's like a little bit crappy.
Yeah. Okay, because I know we're starting to run out of time. One of the other questions I guess I had and the team here at the Masters had for each of you is looking at, Darren was you that said 2023, which seems like it's very too soon, but 2023 and beyond, what are your personal goals, like professionally, I guess, projecting into the future? Web3, will we realize Web3? Darren, you're highlighted on my screen, so I'm going to go to you first. What are your goals for the future and where would you like to see your professional interests develop into?
My goals is to outsmart AI creative algorithms and make something better than what Google's AI can actually create. No, so as I said, I'm moving into installation-based art, and so working on a couple of experiences that involve location-based entertainment. That means it's places where public go to, it's a physically curated space, number of people come in, it's a multi-user experience. I've got a deep philanthropic spiritual side, if I can put it that way. So the things that I'm working on are a little bit more ethereal. I like the idea that technology can have a deep impact on human experience, leave you with a positive, feeling after it. So one of my goals will be to realize a couple of these projects as location-based activations, which the general public can come into. And for me, it's all about technology-less layers of activation. So can I remove the apparent layers of technology from the magic? And for that, I'm working with projection mapping as well, and real-time projection mapping and a few other things. It means maybe somebody doesn't need to have a device on at all to be able to see illusionary magic in a space. That's kind of one of my goals for next year, is to do something good, meaningful, and emotionally uplifting.
I love that. I think that's something we can all definitely connect with. Eugene, shall I go to you next? What are your goals for the next year?
It might sound scary, but I think I like to work more with AI in terms of like fashion design and designing things. So I will work more on, playing with the AI and stuff like that. That's one of my goals. And I love to start maybe looking into developing some metaverse related stuff with my fashion brand. So that's some of the things that I will work on. Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. Darren and Eugene, you can take this offline in your discussion about AI in the future. But Caitlin, shall I go to you next? Where are you kind of planning to grow? Where would you like to grow and develop into in the future?
Oh, I never have a good answer for this because just every year the opportunities that pop up are things that you just don't even totally consider the year before. So I'm not sure. But at the moment, just to add on to the list of things that I'm doing, I'm actually working with Screenwest to set up their game funding programs. And yeah, I just want to enable more people to be able to make experiences. It's not necessarily fashion. Actually, it's probably so far from fashion, to be honest. But yeah, I'm doing a lot of that, and mostly WA, but just in general, mentoring and helping other people experience it and get a chance to show their creative side in the metaverse.
I guess this concept, yeah, of like giving back and also empowering young children or our next generation to really engage in this early. Code camp is one of them. A lot of school interventions. Obviously, I come from a fashion background, but I do think this mobilization of the youth to really think about this as a growth area is fascinating.
I got into programming because I was addicted to The Sims, but I actually taught myself how to mod it, and I'd like go in there and change different functions and like make my own clothes in there. And my dad saw me doing that, and instead of being like, don't play games, that's bad, he used to hold game time ransom for learning to code time. But then I got addicted to learning to code instead, so I totally flipped it, and now that's my career. So that's pretty cool. And I think a lot of people should look at it that way as well. Like, being on the computer in front of a screen is not necessarily a bad thing if you're using your time in a productive way.
100%, I totally agree. And then Daniel, I guess we'll come to you last. We've spoken a lot about real-time fashion and your projects there. Yeah. Where do you see this growing in the future? And where would you like to?
Yeah, guys, I wear two caps, so they're two separate companies. So for DA, we're working on, webinars with, potentially corporate executive women and men, and doing, image enhancing, opportunities with them to give them a new customer experience with the technology. But for real-time fashion, when I put the other cap on, my dream is to have bringing young designers into the fashion world, kind of a bit Robin Hoodie, but through digital, and help inspire them, I guess, to keep going with the fashion industry that they're so passionate about. So real-time fashion is about the youth and upskilling, and hopefully working with some established designers or and whatnot. And then with DA, it's about fashion shows and showcasing the technology to the world. And I think and that hybrid, and that's what DA is doing. So does that make sense?
Yeah, I think it's in the sum of to kind of sum up our discussion, it's everything and nothing all at once, right? That fashion can mean whatever it is to you, and there's so many different avenues. Yes. So I know we've only just touched the tip of the iceberg in relation to this field, and I know at the Masters it's something we're always really trying to continually develop and engage our students in. And I want to, thank you guys so much for giving up your time as part of Melbourne Fashion Week to discuss this. It's obviously not definitive. There are so many different ways that the digital experience can evolve, but I think we've really touched on some key themes of where Web3 and consumer and brand engagement is going. So I'm not sure if any of you guys have any lasting comments you'd like to make.
I just want to say, Sky, absolutely, thank you. It was a great panel. Caitlin, Eugene, Daniel, really awesome talking with you. For the attendees, none of us know what the metaverse is, so there's a golden opportunity for one of you to rise to the top, knock Mark Zuckerberg off, and redefine what this metaverse thing is. No, but seriously, it's like such a fresh new frontier that, don't really overthink getting involved with it. Don't think that there's veterans out there that have been doing it for 10 or 15 years. It's like literally a bootstrapped economy of people just innovating and trying things out. There's no right or wrong. Just go for it. Learn. All of the learning is open source. It's been really awesome chatting on the panel. Fantastic. And Eugene, I still love you even though you're doing AI fashion.
Thanks and guys, just to follow that up, it was awesome having being part of this with you guys. Eugene, finally get to put your face to the name. I know you do Australian Fashion Week as well, so finally get to meet you. Hopefully we can collaborate on something.
Yeah, looking forward.
Yeah. Take it on. But Caitlin and guys, lovely. Thank you for having me. So
thank you for having me.
We all get to catch up and have a drink and just talk metaverse for a few more hours sometime.
No, I was saying, obviously it's very fitting to have this discussion virtually, but we are very excited to hopefully bring back our panel discussions as physical events in the future. And I look forward to meeting you all in person and discussing this in the future. but I guess it's really watch this space. For those attendees, to let you know, tomorrow we'll be disseminating the recording of today's event. We'll also be posting it to our YouTube and snippets to our Instagram. And we will also be sharing you all the attendees' social handles and kind of key insights on where to learn more. So I hope this is kind of not the end of your experience with the metaverse, but kind of the first foray into what will undoubtedly be a big part of our lives moving forward. And once again, thank you so much to each and every one of our panelists for giving your time today. I know we're all extremely busy, but it really has been, I think, a very enlightening conversation. So thank you guys.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.